Hello and welcome to another episode of the Inevitability Curve. I am your host, Chris Blask, and with me today is a good friend, Amelie Koran. Amelie, how are you?
Doing okay, all things considered.
There's a lot of things to consider, isn't it? We were talking about
Yes.
in the green room. Where do you even take this? Look, so we seem to agree. We'll talk about the grand arc of cybersecurity with your background and where we are today. That's enough context. But yeah, today, seriously, like it feels like my cousin Vinny. That porch of the cabin scene. Where Marissa Tomei is stomped her foot. My biological clock is ticking. And Joe Pesci, says,
Yeah.
"Okay, let me get this straight. I've the lives of these two boys. I've got this, and how many more things can we pile on this one moment?"
Yes. Yes.
So, yeah. So we'll talk about AI and whether we're getting anywhere because maybe that'll let us talk about the 8,000 other things that are going on right
It's the topic that seemingly just sucks the air out of the room. You may go into a meeting and you're just like, here's this thing we're gonna work on. And inevitably someone throws out those two letters and it just like totally says, oh whoa, how can we exploit this? How can we take advantage of it? And it never really kind of gets anywhere outside of that. So it's like the tar pit, you get in there and it's the AI tar pit.
now. Right. And look, we've both been at this like quite some time, and we've seen these trends and fades and fads and so forth. And sometimes it's a trend, and sometimes it's a fad. And
Hmm.
I've been reluctant over the last couple of years, to see what we currently call artificial intelligence. To be clear, the AI is not anything, right? Getting at all that. Maybe we will. However, right, I really actually think yeah, I think we're at that point. So, so the fact that companies and organizations are floundering around may not be may not be proof that we're all wasting our time in another fad. It may just be large transition. So I don't know. I think I made a posit there. So let's go
Yeah.
back, anyways, right? So AI, right? Artificial intelligence, which is neither artificial, it is what it is, and it's not intelligence. So
Yes.
other than that, the acronym is awesome.
It's automated decision science is basically where it is, and I should know because that's my degree. And when I was in undergrad, part of the stuff I took was regarding they called it general programming. I think it was some Lisp and Prolog, learn Turing machines, and all the overhead for that. And coming from a background originally, I was originally a computer engineering major and then switched because I didn't want to be doing chips my entire life and got to touch on AI back in the early 90s when it was still kind of a whisper network of people who were aware of things, and now looking at where it's at, and it's really just more powerful decision engines at this point, but people are relying on it to be agentic or create and steal art, as it would be. I have a lot of friends who are creatives, and oh man, that whole channel versus the security and tech people, they are very much on the opposite ends of where that may prove useful in the society we have today. So
Well, so let's go back to the early '90s. When 1990, I was in South Carolina at General Electric, and
mhm.
Jack Walsh was putting in a video conference network. They put one of our we made big, huge turbines for power generation. We got this conference center, and I was thinking about that. Say, at some point, I think I was, at least bright enough to say something like 20 or 30 years because we're sort of here now. At some point, we all have cameras. What does it even mean? How do we move that forward? And here we are. In the same sort of way, AI. You're actually doing AI back then, um, and it was different than what it is now. So that's a
Mhm.
good span of time, right? Here we are with all. Now we're in the world where we have video conferencing and cameras everywhere, and we're starting to settle into what it means. We're doing shows like this, you and I, and we're not even on the leading edge anymore. Our friends and family have mostly figured out how to use Zoom, even if they don't, their face only shows up from here out.
Yeah.
How has what was AI when you were in school compared to now? How
It was generally pretty conceptual. I mean, like I look at what we had in the way of stuff I would explore around on campus. It was the early days of computer graphics. So, the facts that we had a lot of the early Silicon graphics machines that were between the art department that we had, the art school. And then the CS school, that was cutting edge stuff that would take forever to render a frame. We had, I think it was an Intel sponsored parallel computing lab that was in between the computer science department and the engineering department. But that, big huge box with blinky lights and stuff like that. But it was the early days of those things. We also had the Robotics Institute, the idea of sending robotics off to other planets, but everything was still controlled here because you couldn't launch the amount of computing you needed to actually have something fully autonomous. So, back in the mid 90s, like that was the state of the art. So the idea of AI then was still very conceptual. I mean, like when I was in class doing Turing machines, it was like you're sketching stuff out on paper because there's nothing there that's actually going to do it. Like you could run a couple, steps along those decision trees with simple computers, using a Prolog or Lisp, those languages at the time that were designed for kind of creating those decision trees. And now, you take this 30 years on. The fact that everyone's wowed because they can pop into Chat GPT and have them write up a cover letter, or adversaries, they'll craft up some potential, mis or disinformation, or some phishing campaigns, save time savers. But my biggest worry right now is thinking, just the data mining. Like we're such a, between then and now, the amount of human knowledge or data that's been collected and it's aware and accessible is growing exponentially. And I think what people are just searching for is just ways to make use of that. Coming from the federal side of the house when I was a public servant, just thinking about my last station there for Health and Human Services is getting access to Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, and trying to make sense of billing, trying to just tease out potentially bad doctors who are prescribing opioids, or folks who are defrauding durable medical equipment, and teasing that out of those large data sets. But, the compute required for that, the models for that, the inferences generated that typically AI is being marketed for, even just 5 years ago, weren't really kind of available. The stuff that was pitched from the HHS CIO at the time was to help with smart contracts. I think it was a tie on to the whole blockchain thing, but leveraging these tools to kind of look up previous performance and stuff, but nothing along the lines of like wholesale creative theft, or using this to do deep fakes and stuff like that. That was definitely not there, and the threat model has changed versus the motivations of like what we should be using, large machine learning and quote artificial intelligence to kind of go and exploit.
Well, so I was thinking about that time frame, right? So from paper and pencil, like literally, at the sort of in the top layer of the people who are thinking about this 30 years ago, paper and pencil. Lots of things happen along the way. But this damn thing that shall go nameless, otherwise we'll start talking to me, right? As you know, the
Yeah.
electric boats I've been building, I built this Alexa into it. I've been playing with that, and as just awful as it is as a consumer thing, having this voice interface I can predictably, if I enunciate particularly well, control certain things around me and do things in a real environment. I found that being fascinating, how it worked and how it didn't. And then, let's take us into the present. I currently have two ChatGPT accounts, the cheap one and the expensive one. My personal one and one for work. And I'm honestly only a few months, 3 months, really trying to use this particular product for a purpose. Right? I think I'm getting a feel for it. Oh, and I guess somewhere along the line between the two is I took one of those electric cars in the truck and put a Raspberry Pi in it last year, and put this Donkey Kong AI project on it, and sort of built it from scratch so I can get one round of hands on it. And I see sort of a 3 layers of evolution right now. There are projects like Donkey Car out there. If you're a real hacker, you can build some LLM stuff and some AI stuff, to do robots and so forth. There's consumer products like Alexa and Google Home and so forth, which, as much as they suck, right, gave us a certain market test of these basic capabilities if they're just at the barely survival level. But already, I'll get to my point if I ever do. I hate it because I'm starting to use. I talk to this thing to talk to chat, and we have deep
Yeah.
conversations and explore complex situations and markets and political structures and everything else. I'm not asking it to do anything perfect. I don't want it to make an AI art piece for me, and I'm finding it just stunningly useful.
Yeah.
Able to get things done by myself that would take collaboration and working groups weeks. So all of that, I guess, taking your well-earned cynicism of the current craft, right? Do you see it? It's got to get better over coming years. Are we on the trajectory to actually fulfill whatever you're thinking we're doing right now, or do you think it's still decades away?
So again, kind of going on kind of the touching on my at least academic history as well as my the experiences I've had throughout my career. I think we're running into that kind of Moore's law aspect of AI, like the fact that this is a technology that you can continue to throw more and more compute at, and it'll just consume it. It's going to need more memory, more storage. It's like a brain. Like if I guess that old Twilight Zone one where it becomes the smartest man in the world, his head grows big. I mean, that's like how AI is getting, and it's only going to be more effective as that those advances are made. But I don't think we're proceeding at that level. So I think right now a lot of the AI companies are kind of struggling. I'd say almost because this is really just vector math and graph theory essentially. You're finding shortcuts. The tokenization is a shortcut for the shortcomings of our computing environment. If you could store the full datagram that's there to hold a full memory, yeah, that's great, but we don't have that. So you're trying to create these neural nets that create these relationships between the tokens and so forth, and they're imperfect because they're not necessarily guided. It's looking at math. It's math and statistics again, graph theory and whatnot. And I think that's the challenge. Is like we've got the math down, but the intelligence is not just rote memory. It's not knowing numbers. It's not performing a task. It's right now, as these stories come out, like more and more of this AI stuff is like mechanical Turks. Like there's people being paid pennies overseas to kind of make it appear like, oh wow, there's computer vision. No, there's someone clicking a button. Like that's a stuff. It's like going through paid captcha kind of still. And that we're still at this kind of don't look behind the curtain type kind of thing. I know if anyone's going to watch this and make comments in the video or whatever, well, Anthropic and OpenAI and Google are all doing these great things, and these great AI scientists are doing amazing stuff. Yeah, this is great. It's research, and they're trying to apply it, but they're trying to justify, I think, the investment in it. But there's a lot of other stuff. Is it even within the security community? Like we need things to advance to a certain point for us to feel comfortable about, letting someone else doing it. I hate to say it, like dumb it down so that like there are entry level roles for people to perform that are just totally kind of replaced. And you mentioned about having your Alexa or your Google Home Assistant or Siri do things for you, having these conversations and so forth. But do people want that? Like I don't. I have a spouse. I love talking to my spouse. I love doing things with my spouse. I like having deep conversations with them. Having that with some chatbot just doesn't rustle my jimmies as it would be. I mean, it's like maybe I'm still that generation. I prefer to have human interactions and human thoughts and the reasoning that you get from a human being. The reasoning that I've read about and seen people show with AI stuff doesn't necessarily, to me, at the philosophical level and even just the biological level of real thinking, intelligence beyond just collecting knowledge. I again, it's maybe I'm waiting for the room of 1,000 AIs to generate Shakespeare, kind of like the whole monkey and typewriters type kind of thing. I think I'm on hold for that, and I don't see it. Um,
I admit to being seriously fanboy at the moment, right? And I know myself when I get like this. At least one process in my head, keeps looking around saying, "This can't be right." No, no, you're all enthusiastic because you think this means this, but you're gonna find out this is a bag of cats, halfway in the middle, and you're not gonna be able to do the thing. And what you said about Moore's law had me thinking because I find myself when I'm talking to people saying, just imagine it. Don't think about AI. Just imagine you had just ridiculous amounts of computing power to do stupid and trivial things, which is kind of true. And as much as,
Hmm.
again, I like the uses I'm getting out of it, I have a lot of value in it. However, right, I prompt engineering my butt. I sit here and ramble for half a minute, voice to text, press go, and see what happens. Just processing my prompt and making any sense out of it whatsoever probably uses more power than a Midwest town. And since we're just since we're just playing and we're building this stuff in, and you have people are actually using it and so forth, we talk about the path, and we have this vision that AI in the short, actionable future over the next 3 years, 5, 7 years is going to get to these stages. And yeah, maybe the second law of thermodynamics, right? We can't get there that fast just by throwing the exponentially more physical hardware, computing power and electricity power at it in that time
Well, it's
frame.
like throwing 9 women to make one baby in a month, type kind of thing. It's a little bit of that. You're trying to parallelize something that doesn't probably need to be parallelized.
But let me see if I can develop a counter on the other part of it. Though I think because what I see happening is that everybody finally, and when everybody finally, then things happen. Money, resources, right? The internet itself. Sorry. Um, the internet itself. When I got it, everybody around me was saying, "No, no, you don't understand. It's an research educational thing." And then the .coms came along, and it's like, "Oh my God, they're going to destroy. They're going to take up all the bandwidth." And I said at the time, and turned out to be correct, that they'll probably add a lot of bandwidth. They'll probably add so much that the other 0.1% that's left over will be more than us academics and geeks had in the first place, right? So net, even though it's inefficient, it's a huge waste of resources.
Nature
However,
abhors a vacuum, as it would be.
right.
Yes.
So this, with all these concerns, I think if we're right about some of these concerns, I get the feeling that the economic and social pressure to solve them is high enough that we will spend what it takes, unless again it's a Moore's law sort of fundamental that we just cannot push past.
Yeah. Well, I think I arrived at college during Eternal September, so I was one of those folks. But I arrived at college versus on AOL when they opened up Usenet, and I started my website the winter of '93. So that was very early on, and the idea of how you could exploit what was the internet at the time was, you're still trying to find your way. What can you publish, what you could self-publish or create that would garner people's attention? And I think we've just been in this cycle. I think um, the whole idea of, again, people pushing to have resources for exploiting AI comes from the fact that my gig before this most recent gig, which is now the most past present gig that I've had due to my layoff. Um, I was working, as a external technology relations. So I was working with all the big tech companies regarding cloud and AI and stuff. And it was interesting having conversations with them because they had all this hardware that they bought that was specific for a certain type, certain purpose or whatever, and they wanted us to use it for another. And it was like, well, it was wasted overhead. It was these servers were designed for this capability, but we could reconfigure them to use for what you need to, because we've already invested in it. And then it was just this idea of just trying to make use of things that they thought they were going to use, and they're pushing that onto others. And I think a lot of it too is it's this, again, a sunk cost thing where some organizations went down the path so far, and now they're just trying to kind of justify having it there. And I think most recently with my gig, I look at what was published for consumer use by that company, and what's being used internal, and they're also subject to looking at lists of solutions that are part of the organization that claim they have AI or LLM or Gen AI or whatever you may have, with the acronyms there, that are included in things that they have licenses for. I don't think that company asked for them. That just AI showed up. It's like the vampire. I don't think they necessarily invited it in. It was just, the fact is like, you're going to have it whether you like it or not. And then the stuff they build internally was to, again, going back to the thing, to exploit and surface insights from data. And that's where most of that is business intelligence use of AI. but you could just do that. It's again, it's statistics. You're looking at relationships and so forth, and there's been models for that for decades. Immediately slapping, the nom de plume of du jour, nom de plume du jour. There we go. There's all the French I know of AI on top of something and say it's been enabled. Just I think makes people feel better. But what's the actual value add?
So the at these points of transition, and particularly when they become pertinent to what I'm involved with, like I say, I get really enthusiastic and get really worried because,
Mm-hmm.
and again, this to the theme of our show, this is always what I mean about inevitability curves, and it's not predicting the future. It's just saying there's a space of possibility, and as we move forward in that space, our actions change the possible futures. It just kind of sounds really simple, but we're we have certain and there's not an inevitability curve. There's lots of things interact. And if you're a kinesthetic, synesthetic oddball like me out there, then you know what I'm talking about. The rest of you are just staring at us like we're weird because, but it's we are definitely going to have certain things happening, right? And if we can't get certain capabilities in the same sort of time, we're going to have certain consequences, which are terrible, right? And in, I could think a half a dozen offhand, but narrative resilience, narrative serenity, sovereignty. Being able to have a conversation between two humans and not know whether the other one exists or not, or the words they're saying are correct, or even if it was a real human. By the time this your video gets to me, did somebody intercept it and alter it in the meantime? You know, if those things are within the realm of possibility now, and if we cannot counter them, we get to the point pretty rapidly, but we just can't talk.
Yeah.
That causes a whole lot of economic stress and pressures, but I think more fundamentally, a lot of don't want it. When the entire global population doesn't want something and is sick and tired of something, then all sorts of pressure comes to apply to fix it. And let's see if I can scope that rant into her particular space. But excuse me, with cybersecurity and supply chain, I just firmly believe more and more that the more I spend in the time in that space, moving along that timeline, that we will not be able to do things like fly spaceships if we cannot have the kind of speed and visibility into all your supply chain data across. And no, you're not going to hoover it all up in advance. I mean, you have things in a ballistic trajectory, and you want to know things about software 3, 5, 7 steps away in your supply chain. And you need it in the next 3 seconds. We have to be able to do that. If we can't, I you and I are really good on the adversary side. I can think of ways to stop all these things, and I know with existing capabilities and tooling are what they are. Those are definitely following their path. And, anyways, right,
Yeah.
the brittle
Yeah,
moments, I guess, right? How close?
I think we're pretty close to that, to be honest. One of the things, having taken the role for doing offensive security for AI at my last gig, I was bringing this up on another podcast. I was at the Red Team Summit last year, not this year. I missed out this year, but last year they had an extra day added onto it specifically to focus on AI, like offensive security against AI. And I think the reason they didn't have it as an extended day this year was like last year was, I wouldn't say it was underwhelming, but it was like we're still figuring things out. The old ways still work. And essentially this is just, a different form of AppSec in a way. I mean, you're still, your goals traditionally are you're trying to get access to training data. You're looking at access controls, or RBAC and so forth on that authentication, and looking at flaws to the algorithms that are in there or the methods that are written in behind there. So the rigor required for quality is still there. And one of the things I think on the supply chain stuff, and I brought this up at another discussion too, is like, okay, so we have model cards. Great, awesome, thank you, Google, appreciate that. But all of that's, one, pretty voluntary, and two, it's really still non-standard. So there's nothing reliable there. It's way far away from SBOM. If you kind of want to bring up the that one, which has been flogged to death for a number of years, and bless Mr. Friedman for Dr. Friedman for all his work on that. But Um, please tell me you don't have like a cutout of his head on a popsicle stick you can kind of bring into these conversations. But I mean,
I
yeah.
had one right here all along, but I couldn't think of it.
But I know Alan's off to the H bomb, the hardware bomb, and I think that's the next progression. But I don't think we really have that with AI. So yeah, even what does exist is voluntary, and to be able to do a sufficient audit, because these things run on lots and lots of data, not lots of code, lots and lots of data. There's no way to really kind of audit all that efficiently. So you're just kind of trusting that everyone was upfront, transparent, and fully honest with somebody. And I think that should give people pause. Yeah, I know had gotten spoken to when I questioned the fact that there was not an AI ethics person on staff. My organization, there's legal people and so forth, but there's no ethicists. And that's one of those things, is like, that gets back to that question, is like, do people want it? Do they want to consume it? We're efficiently effectively trying to expect organics, us, to shoehorn something that's not organic into a use model. And if you're not adopting it naturally, and you're forcing it upon, like you mentioned before, like, how honest is that use? For me, my spouse and I have had, again, the voice agents and stuff around the house, but really it just gets down to it, like asking that to turn lights off and play music. It's a step through series, but I'm not asking it to like do my homework. I know some kids probably do, but I'm like, I just don't, there's not a level of reliability there that instills a level of trust for me. And these are, products from supposedly leaders in the field. And I'm just like, this doesn't, yeah, it just doesn't, it doesn't reach to the level where I'm like, yeah, this is fine. I will, hand off this task to them to do. And I'm sure there's plenty of people with using NCPs to do things, and all sorts of stuff to do part of their work. But day-to-day human life doesn't really work well with these tools right now, unless it's seamless and organic. Yeah, I don't have that feel for it, and that doesn't even speak yet to the security behind it. I don't think the folks who are developing these models are not security people. There's plenty of times I've sat in a room, and there's not a security minded person there other than me sitting in the room, and it's their project, it's their work, but um, they're not trained in it, and unless they're willing to ask a question, it would be me or someone like me kindly interjecting to say, have you considered this? Or when you're done, let me know. We'll go poke and prod at it, and find all the holes, and create more work for you. Essentially, I mean, that's the interesting thing about the offensive security world, is we create work for more people. And I think successful teams also try to make it not seem like you've just dumped a steaming pile of poo on their desk and told them to deal with it. I think those that want to work with them and try to make things better are there, but I just don't get a sense that there's a lot of that out there right now.
So let me. So we're at that point in the conversation. Let's try to look out in the future. And just today, I think I wrote an article for Security Boulevard, a text from property. All you out watching there, go click on it. Click on an ad or
Hmm.
something. I don't know. About sort of an expansion of a LinkedIn post. You might have seen that I not that many years ago, but mental DOS, mental denial of service,
Hmm.
right? And I think in the cognitive security space right now, we're in a extremely challenged spot, as an industry, globally, as people, as societies, and so forth. What's real, what's not real, and so on and so forth. And in the update of the mental DOS article, I think I've tried to explain. Remember the Good Times virus, right? I was very, very
Oh
early
yeah.
on
Oh
this whole
gosh.
thing.
Yeah.
The email goes around, for anybody who doesn't know the story, it says the headline is virus, tell all your friends it's going to delete your hard drive. And there was, to be clear, there was no computer executable code virus called Good Times. It was an email, and it got forwarded, to all the news groups and all the mailing lists on the internet. Tell all your friends. And then everybody would jump in and reply all back to everyone and say, "That's not a real thing. Stop doing it." And it broke the internet. And at the time, I was young and new to all this. I'm just sitting there, trying to avoid doing my actual day job and argue politics and space tech and so forth. And I hadn't got into security yet at that point, and I just stuck my little hand up and said, "You're all saying it's a scam, and this is an actual virus. This is executable code that someone wrote. in their head. They use their fingers and so forth to type it into a keyboard. They transmit it across, these electronic wires. They, just presented an API, a screen that was read by input devices, my eyes, took the code in, made my brain do functions. It made my hands move. It made me actually press send. Made me write this stupid email and trying to get everybody to shut up. It's and I got shouted down. It's like, no, 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 you don't understand. That's not how computer viruses work. And as you know, since then, there's Fred. Fred going out there that he and I do all sorts of crap together, and his PhD thesis is where the bloody term came from. So I've had plenty of chances since then to say, Fred, did I miss something here? Because that still looks like a it's a virus transmitted by computers. It's a wetware virus, and we're literally in
Hmm.
this world right now. Right? This is the way we
Yeah.
work. I take up consuming. I'll use up processing power in your head. I will use the time you have, and I'll use that up for something else. I will lower the efficiency of your communications channels between hosts, you and every host around you. And if we don't find a solution to that, we rapidly approach the point where we cannot run the power grid. We can't do anything, right? Nobody knows, whether any information not seen with their own eyes is real or not. Um,
Yeah.
so we're at this crux, and this is, to the point that I'm getting to. I think this one of my concerns because I see right now the potential in what we call AI right now in helping us address some of that. Giving people the time to deal with human scale issues. And imperfectly, yes, but again, I think if we can't do that sort of thing in the near term, then I think we'll get ants. I mean, we have a lot of ants now. We have ants for a long time.
Yeah, I think you do bring up an interesting aspect there. I mean, that was something else I studied while in college. I studied a lot of stuff in college, but cognitive psychology was kind of the core of that at the decision science
You're
side
more
of the
the
house, along
responsible
with
one of us. I don't know if I ever said that, but a lot of us
uh,
in this crowd, like we probably weren't.
uh,
You're one of those people who finishes things. Like,
yeah, I barely. I might mind you, I'm not really proud of my GPA after I graduated, but one of the things there was, and I think this is a well trodden cognitive psychology thing is just that, and I think this even showed up in Douglas Adams's writings. I don't remember if it was the Dirk Gently or the Hitchhiker's Guide one. I'd have to require me to go reread it, but there's basically 7 slots, in your brain that you can hold stuff resident. You get that tip of your brain type kind of thing. And I think the joke was there, all but one of them are full of penguins. But then in this case, like, you have that overwhelming aspect of trying to keep things on the tip of your head. And if you can, I think what humans run on besides caffeine is anxiety, and that's usually created by just those check cycles through all those 7 boxes. It's like, okay, I'm worried about, can I pay my mortgage or rent? Do I have enough food on the table? Like those are like 4 or 5 of those ones on there is just sustainment. Like, how do I get myself through my day? And that's, humans are just an anxious species. We're rabbits with a bigger brain, I think, in a way. And then like the 3 or 4 other slots that are available, those are the task driven type kind of things to actually like your work throughout the day. Like I've got to go and manage this project and things like that. So that it's I think they're, rather than actual like facts and knowledge in those 7 spaces, I think it's just little tiny boxes of cyclical anxiety that we have. But it allows us to function. Our wetware is just one of those things, and those interrupts, something fantastical like some AI generated, what's the engine now? It's the VOE3 or whatever that's been out there, where people have been posting the video of these newscasts that look really great and totally telling absolute crap. Those are going to hit the eyes of people who don't have that filter, that they're just cycling so fast that it just gets sucked into that cycle, and now it just becomes part of that, one of those anxiety boxes. And it's like, well, I'm worried about the state of the world today, and I'm going to throw some fake news in there, and that box starts to get hot because you're now adding that to that cycle, and those check anxieties. And I worry that, as much as it's been marketed that, these tools and systems are there to help humanity and whatnot, there's that existential harm aspect of it that we haven't fully thought through, of those implications. It's usually been given lip service. Timur Gibru from Google, they famously were let go for bringing up those types of those questions, and I see more and more of that as she highlights a lot of those stories from other companies, and it worries me that a lot of that human safety aspect has really been pushed to the side. It's like, well, they'll walk both ends of it. It's like, well, we're not there yet, so you don't have to worry about it going rogue. But then they constantly push to get to that point where it can now go rogue. I think the most recent story out now is the deception that the Anthropic AI does for the engineer. It uncovers an affair, and basically tries to use subterfuge. So it's like, so what angle do you want to play on? Like telling everybody it's safe, or actually seeing all the stuff that it's potentially doing wrong? And it's like, if I'm a human person with those 7 boxes of anxiety, I'm like, oh hell, I need an 8th box just to handle this existential dread. I need extra memory.
I don't know. I think I developed a certain uh, relief cycle when I
Mm-hmm.
see certain conditions. I keep seeing those around right now, and look, my inbox, my anxiety levels, and so forth are all maxed out. However,
Yeah.
right, the when a problem just becomes so endemic, if it is possible, the pressure for solutions just gets so high. And you know how much influence game is. Because I think we're not done building the internet. I think our big problem is, as we talked about in the green room, right, or and early in this conversation, we've been down these paths. When are we finally going to get there? Are we there yet? Um, and I don't think it's that we haven't achieved things or we've gotten things or whatnot. Is we're not done. We have not built an internet, not one.
Yeah.
We have not built and finished one complete internet yet, and we have still a whole vast domains of security where
Mm-hmm.
folks like you and I have for decades said, yeah, we need to get to that. And the fact
Yeah.
that we haven't dealt with human cognition at all at a cybersecurity level, is a
Yeah.
fascinating indicator that maybe we have some work to do.
There's been some studies, but it's more or less that I guess everyone kind of considers that a soft science. I think, when I've gotten discussions recently in my last employer about vulnerabilities, and the discussions all circle around, well, can we put it into this tracking system? Is it this thing that feeds into another system, which feeds into 5 other systems or whatever to track and hopefully help with remediation? But none of those address the soft vulnerabilities, the policy stuff, the human aspect, the things, practice and procedures that need to get changed to keep them from occurring again. So as you mentioned about things not getting finished being built, I don't think we have a strategy. I think in the 60s when ARPANET was born, we hadn't got to the point where the fact that what are you going to do next? It's just like, we built it, people will come, but like, what's the end game? Does anybody have an end game? And this goes back to, like, I talk at length about, like, a sufficiently good strategy. Everything will eventually regress back to that straight line strategy. If it's a good enough strategy, it's resourced and it's people agree to it and so forth. But as you start out, you're going to have a lot of this back and forth as you're trying to do pathfinding. Well, right now, internet, AI, there's no strategy. It's just kind of like we have this ball of nuclear energy here of just this concept and mirth, to go and exploit this new capability, the new shiny new thing, as it was with blockchain, as it was with the internet back, when that Eternal September thing became vapidly commercialized, rather than where it was originally a research and a scholastic environment. And now I think that goal of acquiring money from that exploitation eschews the concept of a strategy. Like, where are we going? Are we just like wandering through the forest, or like, do we want to go on vacation? Like, I want to go from DC to San Francisco. Do I want to take a wandering route and maybe show up in a couple of months, or do I want to take a direct route and get there in a week? I've done it in 2 days, but that's besides the point. I won't go into that too often. But yeah, I mean, that's we don't have a strategy. I don't think everyone who says they claims there's one out there. No, there's no strategy. There's no leadership.
Well, I will agree with that. I get it, and I don't want to sound like I'm unaware, right? And being
Mm-hmm.
a Pollyanna caffeinated enthusiast and so forth comes with cost. but some opportunities as well, right? Because when you get past, again, I worry about things like actually being able to do this. Now, the
Yeah.
state of the world today, right? The fact that on the human side, and I know we're pushing at the limits of time, but the fact that as threat actors, if I was a threat actor today, I wouldn't write a computer virus. I don't care, right? I would mess with people's heads. That's working really, really well. There are 0.0 defenses against that. Everything you and I have built historically just doesn't deal with that human language. Forget it, right? How do I, understand it at all, Alexa? Much less, get the kind of nuance understanding of it that would it have any protective value in the human situation. Um, so, Alexa, shut up. I swear to God.
Hmm.
Um, so, right, if and this, so for everything else we're trying to do with it, again, the fact that we're actually it is let's forget AI, large language models, right? Computing horsepower that can actually understand human speech well enough to get some of the subtlety. Um, that smells to me like the kind of thing that future versions of ourselves will expect to be built in to human
Hmm.
information systems, because otherwise, folks like you and I will just break them.
Yeah.
Do it now.
Yeah. Well, it's whether or not you're going to do it subtly through, coding and hacking that way, or you're just going to take the uh, basically a sledgehammer to the data center. Like there's two ways to rebel against this in a way, or fight it if you're of that mind. But yeah, I mean, it's yeah, I don't know what the future brings, but I know, given my age, I'm probably not going to be around here for when the world melts down, but be glad to exit before it does. I have a feeling that's where yeah, I don't want to sound doom and gloom, but I just have a feeling, just the folks in charge and stuff like that. I don't see this coming out with a positive ending right now.
Well, endings are relative. History will go on regardless.
Hmm.
You know, we may live through doomsdays, right? We're Terry Pratchett fans, right?
Yeah, I don't want to be fatalistic by any means, but yeah,
But
it's still kind of,
there are a lot of apocalypses, right?
yeah.
They end up being relative and so forth. But yeah, I mean, I think I agree. We are experiencing societal risk. So the risks are happening right now because of the issues. We can't control the information system we built, and
Hmm.
people who exploit it can. There's a mismatch in in, in capabilities, and if that is not fixed in enough time, then structures, companies, societies can collapse, and
Right.
there can be long dark gaps before we finally figure it out. And there's got to be a happier note to finish that on, but
Yeah, otherwise that's a whole other podcast at this point, because you touched on something I would have definitely gone off on a slightly more political tangent, having she mentioned about those in charge and taking control of stuff coming from the federal space. Yeah, I have an entire other soapbox to stand on, talking about that was very relevant to a point in time where I had space in that career area. So
well, the nice thing about doing these things, that it's almost free. We can record another one, and as you know, well, I'm not in this show. I'm gonna not quite ready to say everything in a public forum like this. I have plans afoot that are going to play out one way or another. This calendar year, these next couple months, and so forth, that will prove or disprove some of my thoughts on that issue.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I think we have defensive and responsive capabilities there.
yeah.
And if you watch this show this long today and you don't understand what I just said, then why are you watching? This is a security geek show. We know these things.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm gonna have to stop it there, just out of sheer inability to make time stretch any longer. You and I could do this forever.
Yeah, we just got to go to that planet on Interstellar. They had Matt Damon on, and can kind of stretch that time there.
Right?
Right.
So thank you for the time today. Thanks for everything you've done for the industry and save the bloody world,
Yeah.
and all the rest of us, and for being a good friend, and for wearing my hat. You're in that small crowd of folks that
Yeah.
I was gonna actually have it
The
here with
Blast Cat. Yep.
Last
Yeah.
Cat, right?
Yeah.
Every time I see her
Cool.
name, I think, oh, that's Amelie's one of those folks.
Yeah. I remember it was
I
Disney
started with the
Springs. Yeah.
head lice that probably came with that. But,
It was fine. I was more or less trying to find out where the rental car was in the parking garage then.
All right. So thank you again.
Yeah,
Thank you
appreciate it.
all that everybody out in the world, spending your time with us today. Thanks for that. Be good, be safe, and come back where we'll talk about these things more.